Hi, this is Sean D'Souza from Psychotactics.com, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation Podcast. This podcast isn't some magic trick about working less. Instead, it's about how to really enjoy your work and enjoy your vacation time.
This is the 3-month vacation, and it's 3:45 a.m. Yes, I know it's crazy to be up at this time of the morning, but hey, once it's 7 o'clock, you have lawnmowers and cars and planes and all the stuff moving around, and now it's quiet, really quiet. So let's go on with our next episode. In this 3-part series, we look at what makes your products and your services irresistible. And in the first part, we looked at the concept of buffet versus just a specialty item. We saw that both of them are very enticing to your customer. So if you haven't heard the first episode, feel free to go and listen to it. You can listen to this first and that second, it doesn't matter. But it's a good start to go back to that one and to go back often because we forget. So let's get on with today's episode, which is the power of exclusivity. When you look at what makes anything exclusive, you're looking at scarcity or urgency, or scarcity and urgency. Now, urgency is a really good way to get anything moving, but often we're so fed up of all those ticking clocks and those countdown timers that we've learned not to pay attention to it. Because we know that somehow it's a marketing thing. Yet you can use that urgency factor when you use scarcity really well. And today's episode is really about scarcity rather than urgency. Everyone can make anything look urgent, but does your customer believe in it? And if they don't believe in it, then it's not urgent anymore. So we have to work more on scarcity than we have to work with urgency. In today's episode, we're going to look at 2 factors that we've been using at Psychotactics since we started out in 2002. And the first thing is the reduction of frequency, and the second is working with small numbers. Let's start off with the first one, which is reduction of frequency. There's an anecdotal story about the late Gary Halbert. Gary Halbert was one of the best-known direct mail copywriters on the planet, and so he decided to have a copywriting workshop. Even though he charged nosebleed prices for the workshop, it was absolutely full. So he hosted a subsequent workshop, and that was full. And then he went on to have another workshop and another workshop, and all of them were full, and then it went quiet. Deathly quiet, in fact. You've probably figured out the reason why the workshop stopped filling up. My guess is that Gary ran out of people to attend his workshop. But remember this, Gary was super well known. He had a list of thousands of subscribers. What he ran into was a problem of exclusivity. The workshops were being held at such a high frequency that it seemed easy enough to just put off attending the next workshop because another one is going to be around the corner. You know that. And this is why we had the last Psychotactics headline course in 2013 and then nothing until 2015. Now, the headlines course at Psychotactics is very popular, and hence it is full every single time we announce it. It's not hard to see why either. As a business owner, you've got to send out newsletters, possibly make a presentation. You maybe have to write sales letters for your product or service. And even if you're doing podcasts and webinars, well, you need headlines. You need to write those headlines for your newsletter or for your podcast. So almost all marketing activity is somehow or directly linked to writing great headlines. But let me stop talking about the headline course for a second and talking about how frequently we should have this headline course. So as a business owner, I have to ask myself the question, should we have this course on a frequent basis? And the answer depends on whether you want to create exclusivity or not. If you want a product to be exclusive, you have to create scarcity, because scarcity creates exclusivity, which then creates urgency. In the last episode of this podcast, we looked at Studio 54, and that is what Studio 54 used to their advantage. It's what caused people to want to jump that velvet rope. There was a sense of desperation to get into Studio 54, night after night after night. Now, if you don't or won't have exclusivity around your product or services, you're telling clients that they can have it, whatever it is you're selling. They can have it at any given time. As you can tell, that lack of exclusivity reduces urgency. The client can come in at any old time, get the product or service, and then walk away. So what they do is they decide to put off the purchase until later. That's just what we do. If it's not urgent, if it's not exclusive, why should we bother? At Psychotactics, we haven't tried to reinvent the wheel. Instead, we work on just two parameters to create a factor of exclusivity. The first thing is we reduce frequency, and the second is we work with small numbers. Let's start off with the reduce frequency thing. If you look at the courses that we host online, for instance, the article writing course or the headlines course or the copywriting course, they're all held with a substantial gap. Now, this gap is at least a year apart. It means that if you miss signing up for the course, you have to wait for at least a year, sometimes 2 years. And there is no guarantee that the course will be held on a recurring basis. And this creates a factor of exclusivity. When we first started running the article writing course in 2006, I would have 2 batches. Not 2 batches in a year. 2 batches at the start of the year and 2 batches at the end of the year. So put yourself in the shoes of the customer. Let's say you wanted to do the article writing course. You know that there are 2 batches at the start of the year, 2 batches at the end of the year. Is there any exclusivity? Is there any urgency? Of course not. Because you just have to wait a few months and the next one will come along. And if you miss the first one, then you will get the second one. Now, 2006 was a very long time ago, but somewhere along the line we realized this is not going to work for us. This is going to be a Gary Halbert situation. And so we stopped. We stopped doing it twice a year. We stopped doing 2 courses simultaneously. And we just started having it once a year. And then it became even less frequent. One article writing course was held in 2013, and there was nothing in 2014, and then we had one in 2015. So even as you're listening to this, you realize something. If you were interested in writing great articles, and you were interested in doing that article writing course with Psychotactics, and I said the next course is going to be around June of 2016, immediately your antenna goes up. Because you don't know whether there will be one in 2017 or you have to wait till 2018. And right now, 2018 sounds like a very, very long time away. And it sounds like, hey, wait a second, for a course, that's fine because you have to conduct the course, but what about a product? Maybe what about a digital product? So let's talk about products and digital products. Now, I've been threatening to do this stock cartoons for a very long time, and I haven't done it, and we will do it in 2016. But let's take it theoretically, as if it were a product to be sold. What you do is you reduce the numbers. You say only X number of people can get it, maybe only 200 people. Could you sell it to 1,000 people? Sure you could, but if you don't create the exclusivity, then you're not creating any scarcity and you're not creating any urgency. And the same applies to a digital product. We have a product on pre-sale, and we sold it 2.5 years ago. Now, the product isn't cheap. It's $400. Why is it $400? It's because it shows you how to work with a very small audience. Now, we don't do affiliates and joint ventures and advertising and publicity and all the stuff that you see other people doing on the internet. And yet, our courses, our products, they sell faster than anybody else on the internet. I can say that without blinking because I know that no one sells in half an hour, in 45 minutes. And not with an audience that sometimes is as small as 400 people. So immediately when you listen to this whole spiel about, hey, there's this product, and now the product is going away. So we offered the product 2 years ago, and maybe next year we will offer the product again. Now that creates scarcity. It's a digital product, but it's not going to be around. It's expensive, but it's not going to be around. And immediately, as I said earlier, your antenna goes up. All scarcity is unreal. There's no such thing as real scarcity. Scarcity is just a matter of musical chairs. You take away a couple of chairs or you take away 3 chairs and now suddenly there's scarcity. The thing is that we're afraid. We're afraid that the clients will go to the competition. We're afraid that clients won't come back. And it takes a lot of nerve to put that velvet rope around our business. And if you want to create scarcity, you have to put the velvet rope around your business. Let's say you're expecting 10 clients to sign up to a course. Well, offer 8 seats. Remove 2 of those chairs. If you're expecting 5 people, remove 2 more chairs. Now we have only 3 chairs. If you go the other way and you say 25 seats, now what you've created is this abundance. And it's no longer urgent, it's no longer exclusive, it's no longer scarce. At this point in time, if you're thinking that all your products and all your services need to be scarce, then that's not the situation. You don't have to reduce the frequency on everything. You don't have to make everything scarce. When you look at psychotactics, not everything is scarce. Some things are very readily available and the other ones are scarce. But let's talk about readily available. And you look at the brain audit, for instance. So prospects will find the brain audit on Amazon.com or they will find it on our site. And for the most part, except when we're making a special offer, the brain audit is very easily accessible. And that becomes the doorway product. So we have lots of doorway products. Books on testimonial, chaos planning, lots of doorway products, lots of podcasts, lots of things that are very unscarce, very easily available, very frequent. And then they decide they would like to join 5000 BC. And they run into a wall. They have to get on a waiting list. To join 5000 BC, they can't just waltz in, they have to pay to be on a waiting list. Who pays to be on a waiting list? Now, it's just $10 to be on the waiting list, but still, you have to wait for 3 or 4 weeks. And the reason why we put up this wall is because we want people to wait for a few weeks so that they're not impulsive, that they have thought through that decision and they want to be members of 5000 BC. So now we're creating exclusivity. We're creating this wall, and you have to climb over this wall, and you have to pay that $10 to be on the waiting list. And then, after 3 or 4 weeks, you get in. Immediately, you're seeing yourself differently from just going to a website, clicking on the button, getting the access to the membership site, and you're in. And this wall makes a huge difference to your perception. Yesterday, for instance, someone went and bought the Info Products course. I don't know if you're listening to this, but if you are, then you know who you are. Now, the Info Products course is almost $2,000. And Renuka writes to this person and says, you haven't read the brain audit because we don't have you on our list. And now the brain audit can be bought at $9.99 on Amazon.com. Would you do that? Would you give back $2,000 over $9.99? But that's what she did. She said you should read it And you should decide if it's good enough for you. And if you don't like it, then there's no point in taking the info products course. You might as well take all your money back. And that creates the exclusivity. It creates the wall. It creates the velvet rope. It's scary. No one said it's not scary. But that's how clients stay with you, because they want to be part of this elite group. They don't want to be part of something they can get in and get out very easily. So we've covered quite a lot in that small section, but the main thing was the factor of exclusivity, musical chairs, removing the chairs, and then having a situation where you have doorway products, which are frequently available. So yes, you want to start looking at your product or service. Is it a doorway product? If so, it may not need that tag of exclusivity. But as it goes up in price or complexity, you want to create a barrier. You want to create several barriers and make it exclusive. Even if you have a digital product that should be easily available, you can offer it just once a year and make it very exclusive. This takes us to our second factor, which is working with small numbers. I want you to think for a second of a 947-person waiting list. That's the Tory 2.0 dress by M.M. Lafleur. M.M. Lafleur is a direct-to-consumer fashion retailer, and it started by a former financial consultant, Sarah Lafleur, and designer Miyako Nakamura. At $235, it's not cheap for a dress, but the very fact that you can't get it right away, that's causing the waiting list to keep going up and away. The same principle applied to my Nakaya Araishu fountain pen. Back in May of 2014, I had ordered a pen from Japan. And I was waiting and waiting and waiting. A month passed, 2 months passed, 6 months passed, a year passed, a year, and 3 months passed, a year, and 6 months passed. And now I have my pen. Now, of course, it's handcrafted, it's made from ebonite, and it's got urushi layers on it, and it comes with a solid gold 14-karat nib. But that's not the problem. The problem is I can't have it. The problem is they're working with such small numbers that I have to wait and I have to pay the price, and it's not cheap. It's a $1,000 fountain pen. And yet I'm willing to wait for all that time. But these are just products, a pen, a dress. What about a service? Jiro Ono runs a sushi restaurant under the Ginza railway station in Tokyo. Jiro has been honored by Michelin and gets Michelin's highest 3-star rating. A meal costs $380 per person. In 20 minutes, you're done with the meal. You get in, 20 minutes later, you're done with the meal. So how many people would you expect to see at Jiro's restaurant every night? 100? 50? 30 perhaps? The correct answer is 10. 10 people. Night after night, only 10 diners sit for a 20-minute meal, and then you're done. So that restaurant makes over $1 million a year. Does that sound like a good business to you? Having 10 people and earning over $1 million a year? It's a myth that you have to be big to be successful. In reality, being small and having small groups as your clients can be as or even more successful than getting bigger all the time. This whole factor of smaller numbers creates an enormous amount of exclusivity. It makes your business irresistible. But it's one thing to be irresistible and the other thing to be profitable. And let's take the membership site at 5000 BC, for example. Now, 5000 BC has been running since 2003. It has fewer than 400 members. That may at first seem like an awfully small number, when you consider that the psychotactics list runs into several tens of thousands. Yet, that small number is responsible for generating almost 90% of our income. I'll say it again. That small number is responsible for over 90% of our income. Well, I said almost, but maybe over. Again, we have the flip side. Everything doesn't have to be small. 5000 BC membership can consist of just a few people. On the other hand, something else, some other membership could have a lot of people. You could create a handcrafted collection of some products and just a few of them, and then another one, you could just mass produce it. And it's not any different with services. You could work with 300 clients with one kind of service and then just 15 clients with another kind of service. Jiro Ono is not going to have 11 people for dinner. He's only going to have 10 people for dinner. Smaller numbers work magnificently well to create this factor of exclusivity. You get to live your life on your terms, and because you have such small numbers, your product or your service is always in demand. So that brings us to the end of this podcast. Let's do a summary, shall we? 2 things that we looked at. The first is the frequency, and the second thing we looked at was working with smaller numbers. So frequency is simply just don't have it that frequently. The moment you have this musical chair scenario, immediately it puts a velvet rope around the product. It puts a velvet rope around your service. So first is frequency, not so frequent. And the second is work with smaller numbers. It doesn't matter if you have this big client list. Do something specific for a smaller group, just like we do in 5000 BC. Give them personalized attention. And that brings us 90% of our revenue. There, not almost, not more, 90%. So what's the one thing that you can do today? Well, you could have your event less frequently, you could have your product service showing up less frequently, but I don't know whether you're that keen on doing it. What you can do, however, is look at your services or look at your products and see what you can carve out. So if you're an accountant and you have 200 clients and they're all in this accounting thing, you can carve out one small section where you do more than just accounting. And that creates this velvet rope where people have to qualify to get in, and they pay more for it, and they're more loyal as well. So you can do that today. You can look at your services and either partition it or create a brand new service. Same thing applies for a product. You can create a partition, and that you can do today. In a couple of weeks, we're headed to Nashville, Tennessee, and then to Amsterdam to do the workshops on storytelling. If you're coming to the workshops, we're looking forward to seeing you there. If you're not, we'll see you at some other workshop. One of the features of the workshop is our silent partner, Elmo. He goes everywhere with us. And Elmo, he takes the lion's share of our business. He does nothing. He sings songs, and he comes to all our workshops. He travels the world. So if you haven't already met Elmo, you will meet him someday. But for now, you can join us at our membership site in 5000 BC. It's mostly introverts there. We're quiet. We work efficiently. I'm the extrovert, of course, but almost all our members are introverts. If you like that kind of working space, then you have to get on the waiting list. Make sure you get there. It's at 5000bc.com. You have to have read the brain audit before you get to 5000 BC. So make sure you read the brain audit, and then and only then should you check on 5000 BC. And if you're listening to this podcast, which you are, then put a reminder in your system and please leave a review for us on iTunes because, it helps. So that's it from me. We've finished part 1 and part 2. Next time we look at the third part, which is the build-up and why it's so critical when you're creating an irresistible offer. Bye for now.